The hippie movement almost entirely developed in a small area of San Francisco, only several blocks long, known as the Haight-Ashbury district, or the Haight. The last episode, I covered the various organizations and people who were key to setting up the movement. The events of the Haight exhibited a creativity I have not seen elsewhere in history. That is particularly in such a strong change from society, but also in the arts. It encouraged everyone to participate, to make it theirs. Everyone was an artist, a musician, and an actor. January 1966 was the Trips Festival. This was part of Ken Kesey and the Merry Prankster acid test. These were get-togethers in which free LSD was distributed. LSD was legal at the time. The Trips Festival occurred close to the Haight, with 10,000 people attending. The acid tests were performed all up and down the West Coast and strongly led to what was forming in the Haight. LSD was being tested at the time by the CIA MKUltra project for, among many things, its creative potential. Writer and social movement guru Ken Kesey, who had been part of these experiments, took it to the public to encourage an expansion of consciousness. There is a separation from what was going on in early 1966 and later in the year. Later in the year is when the hippie movement was truly developing as something different than what Ken Kesey and the Merry Pranksters or the Beatniks were doing. It then took on a life of its own. From late in 1966 until early in the summer of 1967, a small number of people in the Haight were truly creating something unique. Those who organized the Summer of Love were disappointed in what it became. The Haight then, though still a unique place, lost its scale of imagination. It had been a mystical place, but the masses did not add to that. The creators then would leave and go other places, mostly in small communities or communes in Northern California. Their vision was one of peace, community, commitment to humanity, and all that promoted these. Instead, the drugs took over. Violence and crime rose. Also, the movement became heavily commercialized. San Francisco became overwhelmed with those wishing to escape under any circumstance. The beginning of the hippie movement more or less began with the Love Pageant Rally, held in the Panhandle part of the Golden Gate Park on October 6, 1966. It was the day LSD became illegal in California. The Panhandle was part of the Haight, and where many of the Haight events happened. The Love Pageant Rally was organized by the Thielen brothers, who had opened the psychedelic shop the year before in the Haight. Instead of a protest of the new law, it was a celebration of expanding consciousness. The rally was also in rejection to society's consumerism and materialism. How ironic that the hippie movement would start the day LSD became illegal. The Diggers were the organizers of many things in the Haight. Halloween of 1966, they performed the performance game, crossing the streets in geometric patterns, trying to encourage people to join in. The Diggers were dressed as puppets. Something like 600 others would join in, which, after a time, drew a large number of onlookers. The Death of Money Parade in December of 1966 was created by the Diggers. They dressed as large animals and carried a large coffin with fake money, forming a parade. This came from the belief that pursuing money restricted one from living the life they should. On January 24, 1967, Human Being, or the Gathering of Tribes, occurred. It was organized by the founders of the San Francisco Oracle, one of the Haight newspapers. They expected 1,000, but 30,000 showed up. Many of the movement's prominent figures would speak or perform their music. Other speakers included Ram Dass, comedian Dick Gregory, and many beatnik writers, including Allen Ginsberg. Harvard professor Timothy Leary and guru Alan Watts also spoke. The topics that were spoken of included the importance of peace and love, the need for social change, and the power of the individual. The purpose was to promote this new way of life. There were many factions who were in disagreement in the movement, and this was to bring them together. For example, anti-war protesters thought the hippies were too disengaged, spaced out, and not concerned about Vietnam. Hippies thought the protest would only lead to more violence against them, and would also cause the creation of a fascist state. That is, the reaction our government would have to the protest. Hippies believed in peaceful protest. University radicals such as Berkeley and other campuses were moving towards violent protest. The strongest message of the human being was to question authority. Hippie fashion was also promoted at the Human Being. Media coverage of the event included the New York and Los Angeles Times, both having front-page articles. The Washington Post, Life magazine, the UK paper The Guardian, the 3 TV networks in the US, and many other publications wrote articles on it. Major newspapers in France, Japan, and other countries covered it. The hippies arrived in large numbers for the first time. It seems to me that this was the first big event in which hippies had the hippie look we think of now. It was organized mostly by word of mouth. The founders knew, as most media sources around the US and the main ones around the world became very interested in what was going on in the Haight, that by summer there would be a very large number of youth in San Francisco who had not been there before. February of 1967 was the Invisible Circus. This was organized by the Diggers, the Artist Liberation Front, and the Glide Foundation, associated with the Glide Church, which is where the event was held. Each room was built into a fantasy of what freedom looked like. There were more than 50 rooms. It was to be a 72-hour event. Some estimates are as high as 20,000 showed up for the first night. The church then closed it down after several hours. In the coming months, magazines around the U.S. would do articles about the Haight and the outrageous counterculture there, including Newsweek, Time, The New Yorker, and many others. The articles were generally negative, but had the effect of attracting many to the movement. The term Summer of Love originated with the formation of the Council of Summer of Love during the spring of 1967 as a response to an already large flow of young people to the Haight-Ashbury district. The council was composed of the Family Dog Hippie Commune, the Straight Theater, which many of the big bands played in the Haight, the Diggers, the San Francisco Oracle, and about 25 other people who sought to alleviate some of the problems anticipated from the influx of young people expected during the summer. The council also assisted the free clinic and organized housing, food, sanitation, music, arts, and street cleaning, along with maintaining coordination with local churches and other social groups. Psychedelic poster artist Bob Schimpf was commissioned by promoter Chet Helms to create the official Summer of Love poster, which became a lasting icon of the era. Chet has been called the father of Summer of Love. This poster was displayed at record and head shops around the U.S. The term Summer of Love was first used in the San Francisco Chronicle on April 5, 1967. The organizers created flyers to discourage youths from coming to San Francisco, but instead to develop this in their own communities. They feared correctly that San Francisco was unprepared for such an influx. Another large promotion of the Summer of Love was the San Francisco song, "Be Sure to Wear Flowers in Your Hair." This was written by John Phillips of the band Mamas and the Papas as a promotion for the Monterey Music Festival. It was released in May of 1967. The song was sung by Scott McKenzie and reached #1 in many Western countries. A YouTube link of the song is below. Summer of Love was so commonly portrayed in the news that many older adults came to San Francisco and took tours of the Haight to see it for themselves. They were fascinated, but at the same time disgusted. The Haight became world famous. 100,000 hippies were in the Haight-Ashbury district during the Summer of Love. It was said there were 300,000 hippies nationwide at the time. Actor Peter Coyote, who played a big role in all of this, said the Haight was a constant theater. One would go out dressed like one wanted to be. They would act out as any character they wished to be. I suspect this was influenced by Ken Kesey and the Merry Pranksters' trip across the country 3 years before, in 1964, on a bus referred to as Further, or the Magical Bus. Those on the bus took on characters for the 5-month trip. The trip was filmed and later distributed. The Fantasy Fair and Magic Mountain Music Festival was held June 10th and 11th of 1967. This was held just north of San Francisco. Tens of thousands attended, some believe as many as 100,000. It was the first rock festival. There were several musical festivals in and around San Francisco that year. The Doors, The Byrds, Jefferson Airplane, Dionne Warwick, Fifth Dimension, Canned Heat, The Grassroots, Country Joe and the Fish, the Steve Miller Band, and many other bands played. This was the Doors' first big concert and corresponded with the rising of their first hit, Light My Fire. The festival employed trip doctors for those who would have bad trips from drugs. Admission was $2, and all the collected monies were given to the Hunters Point Child Care Center in San Francisco. This wasn't only music, but promoted art of the time through art exhibits, craft booths, comedy performances, fun houses, and a children's zoo. The theme was Venetian Carnival from the time of the Renaissance. Dress, then, centered around this. This was communal, peaceful, and had a family-oriented vibe that was not present at future rock festivals. The Monterey Pop Festival was held June 16th to 18th of 1967. The event was held about an hour south of San Francisco and is seen as having a profound effect on future festivals and its influence on counterculture. This was seen as the start of the Summer of Love. Among the many aspects that made this groundbreaking was that it was free. There was a great diversity of musical styles and genres. This became a blueprint for future festivals, such as Woodstock in 1969. Janis Joplin and her band were well known in the Haight, but on this day was their breakout performance in which the wider music industry became well aware of her. The Who and Jimi Hendrix also had career-defining performances. This is the event that Jimi Hendrix famously lit his guitar on fire on stage. Indian composer and sitarist Ravi Shankar also electrified the crowd. He was the influence on the Beatles and other rock bands in bringing the sitar sound into their recordings. The Grateful Dead also played and made a significant leap forward in sound projection, which was done by their sound engineers. The concert was full of many of the most influential bands of the time. In addition to the bands I have already mentioned, it included the Mamas and the Papas, Jefferson Airplane, Simon and Garfunkel, Eric Bardin and the Animals, Buffalo Springfield, The Association, Otis Redding, The Byrds, Canned Heat, Scott McKenzie, of course, sang San Francisco, and many other bands. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next episode.